I looked at the furious woman before me. Since she had broken one of my mother's legs that day, I had no choice but to return the favor twofold. So I broke both of her legs. But I won't kill her. I'll let her live on. Upon seeing me, the two of them were puzzled at first, then exchanged a glance, and suddenly seemed to understand everything. When my mother was sold into the brothel, she was already pregnant with me. Afraid of being discovered, she tightly bound her belly with a chest wrap. Unfortunately, secrets are hard to keep, and the madam eventually found out. My mother desperately protected her belly, kneeling before the madam and begging tearfully to spare my life. The madam glanced at my mother's face and said with a laugh, "Such striking looks. Buy one, get one free. I'm actually making a profit." Madame Huang's remark about my mother's striking appearance saved my life, as she exceptionally allowed my mother to give birth to me. The other girls in the brothel whispered behind her back that Madame Huang was playing favorites, breaking the rules of Spring Scenery Pavilion. Since ancient times, there has been a rule that brothel girls are not allowed to bear children. Of course, if a courtesan wished to bear a child, it wasn't impossible. She simply had to pay the childbirth fee for 1 year herself. The so-called childbirth fee referred to the silver earned from entertaining patrons. As long as she compensated the madam with her personal savings equivalent to a year's earnings from her work, she could have a child. A year's childbirth fee was no small sum, and in this profession, one's livelihood depended on youth. Delaying a year meant losing a year's income. If they didn't save enough silver in their prime, they'd end up worse off than stray dogs in their old age. So virtually no one would take such a step. Moreover, brothels had taboos. If any courtesan became pregnant by a patron, it broke the rules, and likely no one would dare visit that establishment again. Although my mother didn't conceive me at Spring Scenery Pavilion, the other courtesans feared her having me would violate the norms and harm their business. So, naturally, they were displeased. Madame Huang offered no explanation, merely stating coolly, "I am showing favoritism, but if any of you can rival her in beauty, I'll favor you too." At that, everyone fell silent. After all, in this line of work, it's not just about youth, but even more about beauty. My mother was exceptionally beautiful, truly like a lotus rising from clear water, naturally elegant without any adornment. Madame Huang was overjoyed at first sight, convinced that my mother would be her cash cow for the next decade. She didn't question why the matchmaker sold my mother to her below market price, nor did she inquire about my mother's background after the purchase. My mother secretly asked Madame Huang, "Aren't you worried about getting into trouble?" Madame Huang looked at my mother's face with a faint smile. In our profession, though we may seem lowly, once the business is established, our connections are deeply intertwined, not something just anyone can meddle with. I'm only here to make money. The rest doesn't concern me. Then, glancing at my mother's belly, she added, "As for the child in your womb, it's no trouble at all. If it's a boy, I'll have a rare commodity. If someone comes looking, I hand him over and reap the rewards. If it's a girl, that's even better. I'll have another cash cow." Madame Huang burst into laughter, convinced she had made a sure profit deal. After 10 months of pregnancy, my mother gave birth to me, disappointed that I wasn't a boy, not because she favored sons over daughters, but because if I were male, that man would surely have taken me away from this misery. But as a girl, I was destined to become Madame Huang's future cash cow, shared by countless men. After all, my mother had been sold to Spring Scenery Pavilion, and any daughter she bore belonged to it as well. I lived in Spring Scenery Pavilion until I was 5, but my mother forbade me from going to the front courtyard, allowing me only to play in the back. Being naive then, I often sneaked to the front courtyard to peek at the beautiful sisters while my mother was entertaining clients. I saw how those men, just by the sisters' laughter and chatter, would frantically stuff banknotes into their bosoms. Filled with envy, I even dressed up at home, mimicking their speech and gestures. Once caught by my mother, she nearly broke down. That was the first time she hit me, leaving me wailing loudly. After hitting me, she began to strike herself, slapping her own face fiercely again and again, ignoring the blood at the corner of her mouth as she murmured incessantly, "It's Mother's fault. Mother is worthless. Mother has wronged you." Little as I was and understanding nothing, I could only clumsily embrace my mother. "Ewan was wrong. Ewan was wrong. Ewan will change. Mother, please don't hit yourself." We mother and daughter held each other and wept bitterly. From then on, I never dared to learn those things again. Afterwards, my mother rented a small courtyard next to Spring Scenery Pavilion and had me move there to live. Madame Huang didn't interfere. As long as my mother paid the silver in full, she simply turned a blind eye. My mother had previously maintained some boundaries in taking clients, but from that day on, she began accepting those she had refused before, regardless of age, background, or appearance. As long as the silver offered was sufficient, my mother would take them. Though the silver she earned grew increasingly more, my mother grew increasingly thinner. Once, I accidentally saw my mother changing clothes, her back covered in bruises that looked like the imprints of a man's foot, which must have been kicked with full force to leave such marks. Scattered among the bruises were scars from burns made by a tobacco pipe. It was a shocking sight. I held my mother and cried uncontrollably. I wasn't foolish. I knew exactly what these were. My mother hugged me tightly, comforting me softly. "It doesn't hurt. I'm fine, my dear Yuaner. When I've saved enough money, I'll buy your freedom. Then you can marry an ordinary farmer and live a simple, ordinary life together." That year, I was 8 years old, and I could already understand the hidden meaning in my mother's words. I knew my father was no ordinary man. Once, when my mother was in a bad mood, she drank alone under the moonlight. Drunk, she slumped over the table, sobbing quietly, cursing someone under her breath. I listened carefully for a long time before I could make out the name. His name was Ian Song. I don't know how many people named Ian Song there are in the entire capital, but the most famous one is known by everyone. That would be the current Grand Tutor Ian Song, renowned for his integrity and nobility. Afterward, I secretly waited outside the Song estate for half a day and finally saw this Grand Tutor leave. With just one glance, I was certain he was my father, because we looked very much alike, except he was holding his other daughter in his arms. I knew her name was Cindy Song, the only acknowledged daughter of Ian Song. Father and daughter chatted and laughed together. Cindy was charmingly naive, delicate and lovely, like a jade maiden beneath the statue of Guanyin. Cindy whispered something in Ian Song's ear, making him laugh heartily, and he gently pinched her cheek. The father and daughter passed by me as if I were invisible, without even a glance in my direction. I felt a bit disappointed, but not heartbroken, though I had no father. I had the best mother in the world. I knew my mother lived a hard life, so I studied embroidery diligently, working hard to sell handkerchiefs for money. For every 10 extra handkerchiefs I embroidered, my mother could endure one less humiliation. Day and night we scrimped and saved, until in the year I came of age. My mother and I finally gathered enough silver for our freedom. When we handed the silver to Madame Huang in exchange for our 2 deeds of servitude, my mother and I embraced and wept uncontrollably. The sisters in the establishment also cried along with us, and in small groups, they slipped us jewelry, clothes, and some silver. "Once you're out, don't look back. Live a good life. Don't trust men. Take care." Regardless of past disagreements or arguments they might have had with my mother, in that moment, they sincerely wished us well. That night, my mother and I fell asleep in each other's arms, dreaming of finding a place to settle down, raising a few chickens, a pig, and cultivating a couple of plots of land. At the thought of such happiness, we mother and daughter exchanged smiles, feeling truly blissful and sweet in that moment. We didn't fall asleep until the early hours of the morning. When I awoke again, it was already noon the next day. I called out for my mother a few times, but there was no response. Getting up, I found porridge still warm on the kitchen stove. Assuming my mother had gone out to buy supplies for our journey home, I drank my porridge and waited patiently, but I waited until the sun set behind the western hills without seeing my mother return. Anxious and worried, I immediately went out to search for her. I searched everywhere nearby, but couldn't find my mother anywhere. With no other choice, I returned to Spring Scenery Pavilion and sought out Madame Huang. When it came to finding people, Madame Huang was undoubtedly thousands of times better than me. Madame Huang didn't hesitate and immediately called people to start searching. Then she comforted me, telling me not to worry. Perhaps my mother was just delayed by some matter. Holding onto a sliver of hope, I waited patiently once more. About another hour passed before the person sent to search returned. His expression was grim, and my heart sank heavily. Mistress Liu is dead. Those 4 words shattered all my strength and expectations, plunging me into darkness. Before my eyes flashed bizarre visions, and every moment I'd shared with my mother passed through my mind like a series of paintings. It finally settled on an image of my mother in her youthful beauty, standing in the distance, smiling and waving at me as if saying goodbye. I wanted to chase after her, but something tripped me, and I could only watch as my mother transformed into a sky full of stars before I jolted awake, only to find it was already the next day. Madame Huang was waiting by my bedside and told me everything when she saw I was awake. My mother had gone to the pastry shop to buy some treats, but accidentally bumped into Cindy Song, the daughter of the Grand Tutor, causing the jade pendant at her waist to fall and chip slightly. Cindy Song was furious and ordered someone to break one of my mother's legs. It should have ended there, but unexpectedly, First Madame Song arrived later, took one look at my mother, and ordered her to be beaten to death on the spot. No one knew why, but First Madame Song claimed that the jade pendant on Cindy Song was a gift from the Emperor, and by breaking it, my mother had committed a capital offense. No one dared to intervene, and so my mother was brutally beaten to death in the street. Child, accept your fate. We are born lowly, while some are born noble. People are simply not the same. If you need to cry, then cry. Let it all out, and you'll feel better. Madame Huang spoke to me with profound sincerity. I didn't cry, but looked up steadily at Madame Huang. Mother, you must know about my mother and the Song family, right? Can you tell me? Madame Huang's eyes flickered uncertainly as she asked, "Do you want revenge?" I nodded. Madame Huang was shocked. "Are you insane? How is that any different from seeking death?" I gave a bitter smile. "Even if it means death, I must seek justice for my mother." I looked at Madame Huang with unwavering determination. Madame Huang sighed helplessly and finally spoke. "Your mother truly had a tragic life. After buying my mother, Madame Huang indeed couldn't rest easy, so she secretly investigated her background. She didn't claim to know everything about my mother's story, but she was aware of most of it. From her words, I learned that my mother and my father, Ian Song, were childhood sweethearts who had been betrothed since they were young. My father came from a poor family with ailing parents, so the money for his studies and the journey to the capital for the imperial exams was earned stitch by stitch by my mother through sewing and mending for others. Before my father left for the capital to take the exams, he married my mother. He then stayed away for 3 years without returning, while my mother remained to care for his grandparents until their passing. When my mother went to the capital to find him, she discovered he had already married. His new wife was the daughter of the chief examiner. My father told my mother, "My mentor has shown me immense kindness. I cannot betray his daughter. Mistress Liu, my career is thriving now, and no one must know about our past. Please endure this for my sake." Helpless, my mother accepted demotion from wife to concubine. After entering the household, she kept to herself. But the first wife was difficult to deal with. Once, while my father was away on official business, the first wife stormed into my mother's courtyard with her people and found a pair of men's undergarments. Accusing my mother of adultery, she immediately had her sold off. She even instructed the matchmaker to ensure my mother was sent to a brothel to be used by countless men. After hearing Madame Huang's words, I looked at her and asked, "Madam, do you think my father knew my mother was innocent?" As soon as the words left my mouth, I realized how foolish the question was. How could Ian Song not know? He is the current Grand Tutor. My mother earned money for his studies, observed mourning for him for 3 years, and endured all kinds of hardships. If she had wanted to be unfaithful, she would have done so long ago. If Ian Song had any conscience at all, he wouldn't have let my mother wait for him in their hometown for 3 years. Though it appeared to be the first wife's doing, Ian Song was behind it, backing and allowing it, merely to protect his official reputation without getting his own hands dirty. Madam Huang advised me again, your father is the grand tutor, and Mrs. Song's family is also a powerful clan. Their daughter Cindy Song will become empress next month. Let go of revenge. I believe your mother wouldn't want you to pursue it. I looked at Madame Huang and spoke earnestly once more. Mother, I want to enter the palace. I know you can help me, and even if you can't, the person behind you certainly can. Haven't you been gathering intelligence for him all along? Madame Huang was right about one thing. I couldn't handle Ian Song and the Song family myself, but someone could. The only one in the empire who can deal with them is the one residing in the palace. Madame Huang's eyes flickered with surprise and doubt, as if she hadn't expected me to discern the true purpose of Spring Scenery Pavilion. After a long pause, she finally said, wait for me a few days. I waited for 3 days, until a lavishly dressed young master came to my courtyard. He looked me over, a flicker of admiration in his eyes, though it vanished as quickly as it appeared. He asked with keen interest, how did you know Madame Huang was collecting intelligence? Knowing this man was my hope for revenge, I answered carefully. I've grown up in Spring Scenery Pavilion since childhood, though I couldn't go to the front courtyard. I'm familiar with the back, and from there, one can observe much of what happens in the front. Whenever court officials came to Spring Scenery Pavilion for entertainment, Madame Huang would arrange for them to use the 3 private rooms: Plum Moon Pavilion, Willow Moon Pavilion, and Creek Pavilion. No matter how busy the establishment was, these rooms were reserved exclusively for court officials. I initially thought Madame Huang was simply currying favor with these officials, until one day, while playing in the backyard, I noticed these 3 rooms appeared twice as large as the others from the outside. Yet, having been inside them, I knew their interior layout and furnishings were no different. So I deduced that these rooms must contain hidden chambers specifically designed for eavesdropping and gathering intelligence. The man chuckled at my words. You're clever, but what can you actually do for me? I can gather intelligence from the Imperial Palace for you. I quickly responded. The man laughed heartily and turned to leave. I didn't understand his reaction, but all I could do was wait patiently. After nearly a month of waiting, Madame Huang came to me. Prepare yourself. You'll be entering the palace in half a month. I was to enter the palace as Lin Lu, daughter of the governor of Ji Province, with the rank of beauty, and would reside in Willow Wind Garden. 3 or 4 other selected women entered the palace at the same time, all holding the rank of beauty. I blended in among them without standing out. Meanwhile, Ian Song and First Madam Song's only daughter, Cindy Song, had already entered Eternity Palace half a month ago to become the current empress. On my very first day in the palace, a young eunuch quietly approached me and said, our master says that Cindy Song of the Song family is too arrogant and wants you to teach her a lesson. Hearing this, I was slightly startled, but before I could ask any questions, the eunuch disappeared into the crowd, vanishing from my sight. I knew this was a test from that wealthy nobleman, but expecting a mere beauty like me to teach the empress a lesson, he certainly thinks highly of me. Soon after entering the palace, I heard that Cindy Song was extremely formidable, with remarkable skills that had subdued several senior concubines in the harem. Of course, Cindy Song's smooth sailing was largely due to her backing from Ian Song. After all, as the grand tutor, even the emperor respectfully addressed him as teacher. Most of the civil officials at court were his disciples, and his words carried immense weight in the imperial court, so no one dared to cross Cindy Song. It was said that just because the emperor glanced a few times at some palace maids in Eternity Palace, Cindy Song had them beaten to death. And when any concubine displeased Cindy Song, she would directly remove their green-headed tablet from rotation. This kept the entire rear palace on edge, especially the newly entered beauties, who feared offending Cindy Song above all. So, That man truly presented me with a great challenge. But I'm someone who thrives on challenges. Since I wanted to overthrow the Song family, that man was my best ally, and I had to make him see my value. So on the second day, after entering the palace, I secretly spread a rumor that Consort Lou of Willow Wind Garden, boasting a slight resemblance to the Empress, had brazenly claimed in her courtyard that she would win the Emperor's favor within just one day. This news spread throughout the rear palace, piquing the curiosity of consorts who hadn't previously noticed me. Some palace maids and eunuchs pretended to pass by my courtyard, craning their necks to see if I truly resembled Cindy Song. While quietly gathering information, I didn't disappoint them, sitting openly in the courtyard for all to see. Clearly, this news also reached Eternity Palace. So early on the third day, a palace maid from Eternity Palace came to my door. "Beauty Lou, Our Highness wishes to see you." I followed the maid to Eternity Palace, where she had me wait at the entrance while she went in to announce my arrival. But she was gone for half an hour, and I had to stand there the entire time. After nearly an hour had passed, a young maid emerged. "Her Majesty the Empress is speaking with other ladies and has no time to see you now. Kneel here and wait." I didn't argue, obediently kneeling at the doorway. The main gate of Eternity Palace was open, and the sounds of laughter and merriment inside carried clearly to where I was. Sister Empress is too kind. Such a lowly beauty who dares offend her superiors deserves severe punishment. Indeed, allowing such a person into the palace only tarnishes the harem. I heard this beauty Lou hails from G Province, where the customs are already poor, and women show themselves in public. So disgraceful. The voices of gossip and mockery reached my ears clearly, but I felt no anger. Simply kneeling with my head bowed, I knew this was a case of making an example out of someone to warn others. After kneeling for nearly 2 hours, a matron finally emerged. The Empress summons the beauty to enter. I struggled to rise to my feet. The matron gave a scornful smile. I followed the matron inside. Cindy Song sat at the center, surrounded by numerous concubines, wearing a phoenix crown that accentuated her dignity and elegance. Her gaze towards me was sharp, and upon clearly seeing my appearance, she slightly furrowed her brow, evidently realizing that I indeed bore a strong resemblance to her. "May your Highness the Empress enjoy boundless peace and prosperity." I stepped forward to pay my respects. Cindy Song sneered coldly. "Recently, there have been rumors in the palace that Beauty Lou resembles me greatly. Seeing you today, I find the resemblance not so striking after all." The other concubines immediately chimed in agreement. "Your Highness is peerless in grace and beauty. How could Beauty Lou compare to you? She's merely an ugly imitator trying to copy a beauty." Such reckless words. Cindy Song chuckled lightly. "Since the words are reckless, she must be punished a little, lest anyone say I am ineffective in managing the harem, allowing rumors to spread unchecked." As she spoke, Cindy Song signaled with her eyes to the matron who had brought me in. The matron approached me and raised her hand to deliver a harsh slap across my face. The blow was swift and brutal, sending me stumbling. I could have dodged it, but for the sake of my plan, I had to endure it outright. Some imperial consorts cover their mouths with light giggles. Cindy Song sneered coldly. "Your face disgusts me. Consider this a minor punishment as a warning. Behave yourself from now on. If you dare stir up trouble or spout nonsense again, I'll make you wish you were neither alive nor dead." Then Cindy Song added, "Since Beauty Lou's face is injured, remove her green-headed tablet to avoid offending His Majesty." With those words, she sealed my fate. Losing the green-headed tablet meant I could no longer serve the Emperor at night. A concubine who cannot serve the Emperor is doomed to be slowly worn down and perish in the palace. The other concubines ceased their smiles, shaking their heads at me gently. In their eyes, I had no prospects or future left, merely awaiting death. I smiled faintly, feeling a dull ache spread in my chest, and knew the moment had come. It was my turn to make a move. I looked up at Cindy Song, crying out in pain, "Please spare my life, Your Highness." As soon as the words left my mouth, I spat out a mouthful of black blood, then collapsed to the ground, unconscious and seemingly lifeless. Everyone was shocked, and even Cindy Song stared wide-eyed in disbelief. One of the beauties pointed trembling at the black blood on the ground and said, "Consort Lu, is this poison?" At these words, panic spread through the crowd again. Those quick-witted enough had already connected it with what I said before fainting, and all eyes turned to Cindy Song. Could the Empress be poisoning a concubine right in public? I was taken back to Willow Wind Garden, and the imperial physician arrived shortly after. In truth, I wasn't unconscious. I was aware of everything happening around me. I heard Cindy Song order the matron, who had beaten me, to be detained for investigation, and also instruct the physician to do everything possible to treat me, putting on the act of a fair and strict empress. I had to admit, Cindy Song was indeed clever and knew when to make compromises. In an instant, she had devised a plan to sacrifice the pawn to save the king. Regardless of who poisoned me, she was the prime suspect. So by arresting the matron, if anyone later used this incident against her, the matron could take all the blame, allowing her to extricate herself cleanly. However, I fear the poisoning case will likely remain unresolved, as this poison originated from the barbarian tribes. A sister from Spring Scenery Pavilion gave it to me, claiming one of her barbarian patrons had provided it. This substance appears to be poison, but isn't truly lethal. One pill produces poisoning symptoms, while two induce a death. Like state, originally, that patron wanted the sister to fake her death and elope with him, promising to marry and treat her well. She feigned gratitude but inwardly scorned him. How could a man who wouldn't even pay her redemption fee dare claim he'd always treat her right? A man's words are the deadliest poison. They weave lies that can deceive women into heartbreak and ruin. In my dazed state, I heard someone announce the emperor's arrival, followed by a figure in bright yellow robes entering. I continued to feign unconsciousness, but could feel a gaze fixed upon my swollen face. "Empress, we entrusted you with managing the imperial harem, and this is how you fulfill your duties?" The emperor's voice was icy, freezing the very air in Willow Wind Garden. Hearing just that one sentence, I felt reassured. I had gambled that the emperor had long been displeased with Cindy Song. Clearly, my gamble paid off. The current emperor ascended the throne in his youth, naturally eager to realize his ambitions. Unfortunately, most court officials were followers of Ian Song, who also served as the emperor's tutor. With Ian Song still in court, which civil official would dare voice dissent? The emperor must have felt constrained at every turn in court, and with the empress also being from the Song family, how could he not feel stifled? After all, no true ruler would tolerate someone above them with greater authority. While he couldn't yet act against Ian Song in court, the harem was still within his control. Previously, whether Cindy Song removed the consort's green, headed tablets, or had palace maids beaten into death, they were not major issues, and he had no grounds to take action. But this time, with a consort being slapped, tortured, and even poisoned, it was no trivial matter, naturally giving him the opportunity to intervene. Thus, the emperor issued 2 consecutive decrees. The first decree stripped Cindy Song of her authority to manage the 6 palaces, transferring it to Consort Shu, directly executed the matron who had slapped me, and placed Cindy Song under house arrest for 3 months. The second decree promoted me to imperial attendant as compensation. These 2 successive decrees stirred up the harem. On the 3rd day of my unconsciousness, I finally awoke under the imperial physician's care. The emperor naturally came to visit me and sent a large quantity of tonics to Willow Wind Garden. For the following half-month, the emperor visited my Willow Wind Garden daily, either dining with me or having me attend him at night, and I became his new favorite. The young eunuch who had delivered the message earlier came to Willow Wind Garden again after I regained consciousness. The master said he is very pleased, and as a reward, he can grant you 1 request. I held up 2 fingers. 2 requests. The young eunuch hesitated, then replied, "This servant must first seek the master's approval." I nodded. The young eunuch withdrew. After nearly 4 hours, the young eunuch returned. The master has agreed, but he also said that when the time comes for one task he needs you to do, you must give it your all. I nodded in agreement. This was an equivalent exchange. I pulled a letter from my sleeve and handed it to the young eunuch. The first request is written in the letter. As for the second, don't worry about it. I will speak with your master myself. The young eunuch reached out to take the letter and prepare to leave, but I suddenly asked, how has the prince's health been lately? The young eunuch instinctively bowed and replied, the master is in good heal. Before he could finish, he stared at me in terror. I waved my hand. You may leave. My suspicion was confirmed. Under the bright moonlight, with the emperor visiting consort Shu tonight, I retired early and had the eunuchs and palace maids on night duty moved to the outer courtyard. Until midnight, I, who had been staying alert, finally heard faint footsteps, and before I could react, a figure landed on my bed. My heart skipped a beat, but I relaxed almost instantly, for I already knew who the visitor was. How did you know this prince's identity? The visitor spoke, and by the moonlight I could see his face clearly. It was the noble young man from that day. His face wore the same half-smirk as before, but his eyes held turbulent undercurrents. I chuckled softly and said, today, I deliberately asked your highness to agree to 2 matters as a test. These 2 matters clearly required your highness's personal decision. The eunuch and others hidden in the palace wouldn't dare make decisions for you, so they had no choice but to report to you. From Willow Wind Garden to the palace gate, even at the fastest pace, it would take nearly an hour, making the round trip over 2 hours. Ordinary officials held low status and lived in remote areas. That day, I calculated the eunuch's round trip time, less than 2 hours, indicating you reside near the imperial palace. Apart from imperial relatives, no other officials live near the palace grounds. Among the imperial relatives, those who plant spies in the palace and operate brothels to gather intelligence are few in number. Only the current emperor's younger brother, Prince Su Ethan Shao. Of course, these were all my deductions. So today, when the young eunuch was about to leave and his guard was down, I tested him with a bluff, further confirming my suspicions. Ethan Shao grabbed my throat, his eyes glinting coldly. You know so much. Aren't you afraid I might silence you to keep your mouth shut? I didn't struggle, instead wrapping my arms around his waist. I already belong to you, Prince. Why would I fear being silenced? Ethan Shao scoffed. The first matter I can assist you with. So, what is your second request? Please give me a child, Prince. At these words, Ethan Zhao's body stiffened momentarily before he laughed. Your ambitions are considerable. Currently enjoying the emperor's favor, you could naturally have a child eventually. Aren't you afraid my esteemed imperial brother might discover this? I chuckled softly. In this conflict with Cindy Song, everyone witnessed the emperor's favor towards me, promoting my rank, bestowing rewards, and even summoning me to his bedchamber, leading them to believe I was the one benefiting. But clearly, the true beneficiary was Consort Shu. She emerged as the biggest winner, gaining authority to assist in managing the 6 palaces, while it was merely a target set up by the emperor, a shield to deflect attacks for Consort Shu. So, since the emperor shows no benevolence, I need not be righteous either. Ethan Shao laughed heartily. You are indeed clever, but even so, why should I, the prince, have a child with you? Because you want to be emperor. I looked at Ethan Shao and said earnestly. Ethan Shao narrowed his eyes slightly. He didn't refute it, just kept his gaze fixed on me. You have ambitions to rebel, yet you lack the courage to share a night of passion with me? Or are you simply incapable? I glanced down at Ethan Shao with a mocking look in my eyes. It was a crude attempt at provocation, but it clearly worked. Ethan Shao pressed me down onto the bed, rising to pin me beneath him. I wrapped my arms around Ethan Shao and kissed him directly. I could feel his muscles instantly tense up, his Adam's apple bobbing as he swallowed hard. The sound was unmistakable. I knew the aphrodisiac incense I had prepared earlier was taking effect. Ethan Shao abruptly scooped me into his arms and a scene of passion unfolded behind the bed curtains. That night, under my deliberate guidance, Ethan took me many times, and I had a premonition that this would be the decisive strike. The palace is ever changing. Early the next morning, news arrived that Grand Tutor Ian Song had fully supported the Emperor's official reassignments and adjustments in court, greatly pleasing His Majesty. By noon, the Emperor had sent a decree to Eternity Palace, stating that with the mid-autumn festival approaching, the Empress was needed to oversee the palace banquet, thus lifting her confinement early and restoring her authority over the 6 palaces to Cindy Song. With this decree, everyone understood that as long as Grand Tutor Song remained in court, Empress Cindy Song's position was as solid as a rock. In the afternoon, Cindy Song summoned me. Everyone watched with curiosity, eager to see how the two of us would clash. Of course, most were skeptical of my chances, given my lowly status and lack of qualification to contend with Cindy Song. But unexpectedly, this time Cindy Song did not show anger upon seeing me. Instead, she smiled and said, "It's been many days. Imperial Attendant Liu, you look radiant. It seems the poisoning incident hasn't affected your health. That puts my mind at ease." Though it appeared she was concerned about my well-being, it was clearly a reminder that she hadn't forgotten about the poisoning. I bowed and replied, "I am at fault for troubling your highness with such worries." Cindy Song gave a faint smile. "Imperial Attendant Liu, you went to such great lengths and set up such an elaborate scheme, yet I remain unscathed. Isn't that infuriating?" Her words dripped with smugness. "My father is the Grand Tutor, second only to the Emperor, the leader of the civil officials, and a pillar of His Majesty's court. As long as he stands, I am as solid as a rock. Your petty tricks are truly insignificant. If you wish to play games, I'll indulge you until you cry out to heaven with no answer and to earth with no relief." I looked at Cindy Song. "Your Highness, can you guarantee that the Grand Tutor will always support you?" Cindy Song sneered at my words, but I didn't want to argue further, because what came next was taking action against the Song family. Counting the days, Ethan Shao should have made his move by now. Sure enough, on the 3rd day, rumors began circulating in the palace that Grand Tutor Ian Song had a bastard son who had come knocking on his door. The news spread rapidly, reaching every corner of the capital within a day, and even the Emperor sent people to investigate. I had made Ethan Shao promise me 2 things. One was the artificial insemination, and the other was this drama of the illegitimate son claiming kinship. The bastard son was found by Ethan Shao, bearing a slight resemblance to my father. Back when my mother was pregnant and sold into the brothel, I refused to believe that my father and the first wife were unaware of her pregnancy. All these years, my father hadn't cared about this child, but now that he's older, having only one daughter his entire life, despite his high status, the lack of a son to inherit and carry on the family line must be his greatest regret. If a son were to appear at this moment, he would undoubtedly be overjoyed. Between his son and his wife, I believe a man like my father would choose the son. As I had anticipated, my father began investigating the boy's origins, which naturally led him to Spring Scenery Pavilion. Everyone at Spring Scenery Pavilion was one of our own, aside from Madame Huang and the other courtesans. No one knew whether my mother had given birth to a boy or a girl, so naturally, Madame Huang and the others would confirm that it was a boy. With Ethan Zhao's prior arrangements, everything my father uncovered was exactly what we wanted him to see. The outcome was predictable. My father became utterly convinced of this son's legitimacy. He was determined to bring the boy back to the Song estate to claim his heritage, and the son outright declared that only one person could remain in the estate, either him or the first wife. My father, being hypocritical, had relied on the first wife's family influence in his youth, so he naturally appeased her and abandoned my mother. Now that he held a high position and no longer needed the first wife, but rather an heir to carry on the family line, she was the one to be cast aside. Of course, he would still maintain appearances, But the first wife's future fate was all too foreseeable. Later, I heard that the first wife had several conflicts with this new son, and each time my father sided with the new son. This infuriated the first wife so much that she fainted several times and even went to the palace to complain to Cindy Song, leaving Cindy Song overwhelmed and with no time to bother me. I sneered at this, thinking that retribution was just beginning. Meanwhile, I received another piece of good news. My monthly cycle had not arrived this month. I immediately summoned the imperial physician. The physician gently took my pulse and immediately congratulated me with a smile. Imperial attendant, you are with child. My heart settled with relief. This news was like a stone thrown into calm waters, stirring up the entire rear palace. The emperor was overjoyed and directly promoted me to the rank of consort, ordering the entire Imperial Medical Bureau to ensure the safety of my pregnancy. It was no wonder the emperor made such a fuss, as since his accession to the throne, he had selected many imperial consorts, but none had conceived. With no heir under the emperor, the state lacked a foundation, making it vulnerable to criticism. Now that I was carrying the imperial heir, it naturally filled the emperor with immense joy. After the emperor departed, Cindy Song arrived with her entourage. They came in a grand procession, fully displaying the empress's imposing manner. She approached me, took my hand, her sharp, cold fingernail guards pressing tightly against the back of my hand. Sister, you truly are blessed. While none of the other sisters in the palace have conceived an imperial heir, you've managed to take the lead. Her words were spoken through gritted teeth, yet she was powerless to do anything about it. Looking at her face, twisted with emotion, I felt an immense satisfaction. Ethan Shao also came to Willow Wind Garden that evening, frowning deeply. He stared at my belly for a long time as if studying something, then finally spoke. Why does it look unchanged? Is the nutrition insufficient? I chuckled lightly. It's only been a little over a month. What changes could there be? Tomorrow, I will arrange for a skilled maid to serve you. From now on, be cautious. Ethan Shao gave his instructions, paused briefly, then added, avoid any dangerous activities in the future. I will assist you, and I will also handle matters with the Song family. Focus on nurturing your pregnancy and take care of your health. At this point, he suddenly realized, Iris Liu, were you scheming against me from the very beginning? If you're carrying my child, then I would inevitably be willing to help you deal with the Song family. I neither confirmed nor denied it. This was indeed my scheme. Instead of answering his question, I asked one in return. Aren't you worried, Prince, that this child might be the Emperor's? Ethan Shao scoffed. He's incapable of having offspring. So, my sense of smell hadn't deceived me. During my nights of service, I detected a faint scent of Tingyong herb on the Emperor. This herb is used for contraception at Spring Scenery Pavilion. Having often played in the backyard kitchen, I'd smell it daily. It's also used in medicinal cuisine. While it prevents conception, it also strengthens the body. It was precisely upon detecting the Tingyong herb scent that I decided to scheme against Ethan Shao on the spot. I needed to conceive a child to use as a tool for revenge against the Song family, manipulating others to do the deed. Before my pregnancy had even stabilized, someone couldn't resist making a move. First, a young palace maid bumped into me without reason. Then the gravel on the path outside my palace was replaced with smooth yuhua stones. And, finally, someone added safflower to my pregnancy, preserving medicine. I had prepared for all of these in advance, so naturally I could avoid them, but I pretended to have drunk the medicine laced with safflower. The entire palace was thrown into chaos, and the emperor was so furious that he smashed the paperweight on his desk. Fortunately, the imperial physician intervened in time, and I managed to preserve this pregnancy. Everyone knew it was Cindy Song who was behind it, but no one could do anything because she had Grand Tutor backing her. The emperor couldn't touch Ian Song directly, but he could take action within the palace. He launched a thorough investigation of the harem, uncovering many of Ian Song's spies placed in Eternity Palace and having them publicly beaten to death as a warning. Just 2 days after this warning, a cloth doll with my name on. It was found in my palace, its belly pierced with numerous needles. This was the art of curses, the very practice most despised by the emperor, and it was directly targeting the royal heir. The emperor was furious, but this time he said nothing and immediately sealed all news, strictly forbidding any leaks. I personally burned that cloth doll. I felt a bit regretful, as I had spent several days crafting it. After Ethan Shao learned of this, he sent a young eunuch to relay a message to me. Consider this a small interest collected on your behalf. The following night, palace guards on patrol spotted a dark figure darting out from the Eternity Palace. The guards quickly gave chase but failed to catch up. Fearing it was a diversion tactic, they surrounded the Eternity Palace and began a search, ultimately discovering a man's undergarments in Cindy Song's bedchamber. Cindy Song cried out in protest of her innocence, but the emperor, enraged, ignored her explanations and directly banished her to the cold palace. I knew in my heart that this was Ethan Zhao's handiwork. Years ago, the first madam used this very trick to frame my mother. Now, it was being turned back on her. After Cindy Song was confined to the cold palace, the first madam grew anxious and urged my father to find a solution. At this point, the role of the new son came into play. At the Song estate, he threw tantrums, threatened suicide, and vowed to kill himself before my father's eyes if he dared plead for him. This led to endless conflicts between the first wife and the new son, plunging the Song estate into chaos. The turning point came when the new son went out for a stroll one day and was ambushed on his way back. The assassins struck with lethal precision, leaving the new son severely wounded. Had the capital prefecture officers not arrived in time, he would have died on the street. My father was furious and ordered the capital prefecture to conduct a thorough investigation. I initially suspected Ethan Shao was behind it, but to my surprise, he later revealed that the emperor was the mastermind. The emperor, nursing a grudge and convinced my father intended to harm his prince, resolved to wipe out my father's descendants. The capital prefecture uncovered clues but dared not disclose them to my father. I advised Ethan Shao to have the capital prefecture shift the blame onto the first wife. The capital prefecture had an epiphany and thanked Ethan Shao profusely. As expected, when my father learned of this, he immediately confined the chief wife to the estate under guard. Because of this incident, the emperor spoke highly of Ethan Shao. Cindy Song was banished to the cold palace. The chief wife was imprisoned, and my father was busy tending to his new son. With the emperor and Ethan Shao overseeing matters in the palace, I could peacefully focus on my pregnancy. Under the careful attention of the imperial physicians, I gave birth to a little prince at full term. Overjoyed, the emperor directly conferred upon me the title of imperial consort. With the emperor having an heir, the foundation of the state needed to be secured early, so many civil officials petitioned for the emperor to appoint a crown prince. The emperor set aside the memorials, saying the matter would be discussed later. I understood in my heart that the emperor intended to eliminate the threat after achieving his goal, removing the mother to keep the child, as his deepest affections still lay with Consort Shu. During my postpartum confinement, Consort Shu often sent tonics and visited daily, spending long hours doting on the little prince. Her fervent gaze was unmistakable to anyone with eyes. Consort Shu's tonic soup contained some blood, activating herbs, which appear beneficial but were actually poison to a woman who had just given birth. These blood-activating herbs can cause severe postpartum hemorrhage in pregnant women, and if not careful, they could easily bleed to death. I knew it was time for Ethan Shao to take action. When Ethan Shao came over in the evening, I placed the tonic soup given by Consort Shu in front of him. Ethan Shao was playing with the little prince, his face beaming with the joy of a new father. "Are you asking this prince to commit treason?" I chuckled lightly. "Hasn't the prince been doing just that all along? Now is the prince's best opportunity." Ethan Shao looked at me. "What do you mean by that?" "In the past, if the prince killed the emperor and ascended the throne himself, no matter how flawlessly executed, it would invite criticism. But now it's different. If the emperor dies suddenly and the prince supports the little prince's succession, Outsiders won't suspect a thing. After all, the successor is the emperor's own bloodline, allowing the prince to remain blameless. I said with a smile. Ethan Shao stared intently at me. Iris Liu, you truly are cunning. Why would you think this prince would hand the throne to the little prince and let you reap the benefits for nothing? The young prince is also your son, your highness. What difference does it make whether he ascends the throne or you do? Ethan Shao looked at me deeply. What if, after the young prince takes the throne, he decides to kill his own father? Ethan Zhao's question was difficult to answer, as no one could guarantee whether the young prince would believe Ethan Shao is his father in the future. I took a deep breath and said, if the young prince can kill you, your highness, it shows he surpasses his father, and you should be proud to have such a son. Of course, if he cannot kill you, then what is there to fear? Ethan Shao laughed heartily, gently pinched the young prince, then stood up with his back to me. Ethan Shao, have truly fallen under your spell in this lifetime, but I find myself liking you more and more. The prince, also want to experience what it's like to elevate my woman to the position of Empress Dowager. After saying this, Ethan Shao left directly. A month later, the emperor suddenly vomited blood and collapsed in the court. After examination, the imperial physician said the emperor's illness was due to accumulated exhaustion. After this collapse, the emperor never woke up again, lingering for only a month before passing away. Consort Shu was also arranged to be a burial sacrifice. Ethan Shao took charge and led the civil officials in establishing the young prince as the new emperor. At the new emperor's enthronement, I carried the young prince as we passed by the assembled officials. When we passed by Ian Song, I glanced at him. He had aged considerably. It was time to send him on his way. During the first court session of the new emperor's reign, Ethan Shao brought First Madam Song, who had been imprisoned by Ian Song at the estate, to court. In the court, First Madam Song accused Ian Song of buying and selling official positions, practicing favoritism, and embezzling hundreds of thousands of taels of silver from disaster relief funds. The evidence prepared by First Madam Song was thorough, clearly indicating she had been guarding against this for years. Ethan Shao launched a sudden attack. Ian Song was caught off guard, unable to defend himself, and was immediately thrown into the imperial dungeon to be executed after autumn. Of course, First Madam Song, as an accomplice and beneficiary, was also implicated and imprisoned in the imperial dungeon. As for why First Madam Song was willing to risk everything, it was because I had a former maid from Eternity Palace deliver a message to her. If Ian Song dies, Cindy Song can live. 3 days later, I entered the imperial dungeon and arrived at the cell door where Ian Song and the First Madam were imprisoned. After just a few days apart, they had become disheveled and listless, bearing no resemblance to a court official and a titled lady. Upon seeing me, the two of them were puzzled at first, then exchanged a glance, and suddenly seemed to understand everything. Ian Song was very agitated, grabbing the wooden door of the cell and shouting at me, "You wretch, so it was you, it was all you." I sneered, "My dear father, for our first meeting, I am Iris Liu, and I bring greetings from my mother." The First Madam was clearly agitated too, pointing and demanding, "What has happened to my Jixin? What have you done to my Jixin?" I looked at this frantic woman before me. Since she broke one of my mother's legs that day, I had no choice but to return it twofold, so I broke both of hers. But I won't kill her. I'll let her live on. You wretch, I'll fight you to the death." The First Madam shook the wooden door, trying to rush out, but she was powerless to do so. After the initial shock, Ian Song had calmed down, softening his tone as he said, "You honor, are you my you honor? I've been searching for you all these years. Back then, I knew nothing. It was all this vile woman's doing. I was completely unaware. Save me, and I'll spend the rest of my life making it up to you." I sneered, "Ian Song, I truly despise you. If you cursed at me now, I might have respected your backbone, your manhood, but like this, what difference is there between you and a stray dog?" Ian Song's face shifted from livid to purple, then flushed crimson before he suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood, clearly provoked by my words. "You vile woman, You'll get your retribution." The first wife continued to scream curses at me. I said with a smile, "For every insult you hurl at me, I'll break one of Cindy Song's fingers. The more you vent, the more she'll suffer. Go ahead, try it." The first wife covered her mouth, her eyes wide with terror as she stared at me. I scoffed. "Well, seeing you like this, I can rest assured, after you die, I'll grind your bones to dust." With that, I turned and walked away. Behind me, Ian Song's feeble voice pleaded, "You honor, save me, save me. I know I was wrong." The First Lady also cried out desperately, "I beg you to spare her. I implore you." Their words left me unmoved, for my mother had once begged them to, but did they ever give her a chance to live? Stepping out of the prison cell and gazing at the sky, I whispered softly, "Mother, you may rest in peace now. Yet I still feel I failed you. You named me you honor, hoping I'd be free and unbound. But I'm confined to the inner palace. Still, I am content, and I pray to be your daughter again in the next life." Epilogue. In the 53rd year of the Liang Dynasty, the young prince ascended the throne as emperor, appointing Prince Su, Ethan Shao, as prince regent, and honoring his birth mother, Imperial Consort Lu, as Empress Dowager. A general amnesty was declared, and the entire realm celebrated together.